Let me check what's going on. I don't know why. I don't know why it's not live too. Let me. Yeah,
Okay.
we are live. So so let me check. Let me check if everything is correct. I need to do a little bit of magic so we can
Okay.
go live. We are gonna go live in few seconds. Let me do the magic. Yes, I think we are live. Let me do the last check-ins on X to see that everything is correct. Everything is okay. Just wait us a few seconds.
Okay. So,
Yes, everything is correct. Everything is working. And we are live.
what's
Hello, this is the Bitcoin Libertarian. Excuse me, I think there is an echo. Uh, hello,
can
are
you
you
hear me?
there? I can
Yes,
hear
I can hear
you.
you.
I
Yes,
can hear
okay,
you.
great.
Okay,
Awesome.
so yes, now it's correct. It's okay. And we are live. Hello,
Okay.
this is the Bitcoin Libertarian. Our guest today is Alexandria. Alexandria is a Bitcoin maximalist from Zimbabwe and a passionate advocate for financial sovereignty in regions where traditional systems have failed short. As a contributor to Bitcoin Magazine and an ambassador for Rootstock, the innovative Bitcoin Layer 2 solution, Alexandria has been on the front line since buying his first Bitcoin in 2021, navigating regulatory hurdles and building communities that are transforming how Southern Africa engage with digital assets. From hosting hackathons and educational events to promoting Bitcoin DeFi tools like rBTC, he's dedicated to cultivating Bitcoin knowledge and adoption across the continent. Today, we will talk about his project, the situation of Bitcoin adoption in Southern Africa, and what we can do to orange pill people who needs Bitcoin the most. Alexandria, welcome.
Welcome. Well, thank you so much for the amazing introduction. And yes, it's been an absolute passion of mine to, I think, bring financial sovereignty to southern part of Africa. I think because I was born in the one part of the world where financial sovereignty is not accessible at all. We have command banking, we have command governments, and this has led to like at least four times hyperinflation in our country.
Yes, I think
Uh,
that as I always said, I think that Bitcoin. I come from Latin America, even though now I'm based in Hong Kong. For us, we have the similar problems that you have it there in Africa. We have corrupt governments. We have a lot of inflation, and I think that Bitcoin is hope for all the people who is needed of that there. But the first question that I do to everyone is, Alexandria, how were you orange pilled?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to orange pilling, we love to do that in the masses. We tend to host like at least be these big Bitcoin meetups in Southern Africa. And I've done it in at least about 7 cities. Actually, I think about 11 cities and three different countries. So I've done it in the most Bitcoin unfriendly countries. I've done it in China, where we have an explicit ban, and you had people getting like life sentences for just like using Bitcoin, doing Bitcoin transactions, for example. I've done it in Zimbabwe, where we had an implicit ban, where basically the bank does not provide on ramp and off ramps to Bitcoin, so it's very hard for people to buy and sell their Bitcoin in these countries. And then I've done it in countries where Bitcoin is actually much friendlier, in South Africa and Botswana. If you go into South Africa and Botswana, you find Bitcoin posters all over. You have people who you can go buy like food in the supermarkets with Pick and Pay, for example. So I've experienced every kind of environment, and I've seen how people are receptive to Bitcoin in these different environments. And yeah, it's just been an amazing experience, but also one that's also slightly challenging, I believe.
And how was, but my question was more like, how was your moment? How you discover Bitcoin and how you come to Bitcoin and how did you become a maxi?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, so for me personally, it was that I've always been passionate about financial markets. I think since a very young age, I've been trying to create wealth, And I started off by just learning about investing. And in 2021, when the markets crashed, because I couldn't go to university, um, I noticed that in Zimbabwe, because the income was so low, so I had my first job before I was going to go to university, and it was paying me about $7, $7 for the whole month. I was like, okay, this isn't going to make this doesn't make any financial sense. I think I can actually make more money by investing the money that I had since I've been saving since a little child. So that's what I did. I spent more time learning about financial markets, and of course, I first started off with Warren Buffett, and he was very anti-Bitcoin. But I kept doing research and I learned that, Bitcoin is actually a much better investment. It's the most undervalued investment. So I took his own principle of buying undervalued assets. And then I learned about the sovereignty that Bitcoin has, which is the more important part because, I think our countries, specifically whether it's Latin America or Southern Africa, sorry, Southern America or Africa, we're very rich in minerals, we're very rich in soils, but we're very impoverished. And this is mostly because of the inability to trade with other countries. And this is because we've had sanctions and we have so many impediments that stop us from trading. So first it was like the investment case, and then second became the what Bitcoin allows for people in our country, and that's what kind of resonated with me in Bitcoin. So since then I saw how important Bitcoin was, and I started like that's when I got into Bitcoin in 2021. But even then it was so difficult because um, because we're sanctioned, right? Almost all financial institutions outside of Zimbabwe aren't allowed to give us any financial services, and then our own country banned Bitcoin itself. So trying to buy your first Bitcoin was almost impossible. I had to create an account from South Africa, and even the South African regulations were like, okay, we can't provide services to you guys. You go try to get services from people in the United States. They're like Coinbase, is like we can't provide you guys services. So the one of the biggest risks is like if you open an account with these guys and you put your money in, will these guys like realize that you're not from the country and just freeze your accounts? And that's a real possibility. So, every time you do a transaction, you buy it quickly from these exchanges, and then you move it quickly to your to your hot wallet where they can't confiscate your Bitcoin. And even that was one of the biggest challenges. So yeah, it was it wasn't an easy journey, I believe.
Yes, usually in some countries where the financial markets are not available, Bitcoin is the way to escape. And this, as Andreas Antonopoulos says, with Bitcoin, we can have each person of the world can have a Swiss bank in their pocket, in their mobile phone. And after you become a Maxi, you created a Bitcoin Reach. Can you walk us through the origins of Bitcoin Reach and what inspired you to start this project?
Yes. So, like I said, with my journey was that firstly, accessing Bitcoin was very challenging. So, if you rely on exchanges, which we don't have because of the implicit ban, this wasn't it would be very difficult for you. But the other thing was that I used to run with Manu, Manu, for Money on Chain, and a guy called Lucas. He actually was also one of the guys who run the program. He was kind of leading the program. A podcast called Global Bitcoin Fest. So Global Bitcoin Fest would basically interview like what we're doing right now, global communities all around the Bitcoin Southern Africa. And what I saw was that, we had so many Bitcoin maxis all around the world facing so many different challenges. And these guys they would overcome. These are guys that were kind of creating and building the pathway for other Bitcoiners in their country. So, you had people like in the islands or in the UK or in Japan, in Hong Kong. And, these guys had been doing this stuff for since 2015. And then I realized that, in my own country, we didn't have these kind of communities. We didn't have a bigger community like what we have in these other countries. So that's what I said. Okay, where is the community? And when I couldn't find one in Zimbabwe, I'm like, okay, let me create one of my own. So Anita Posh, she was one of the early Bitcoiners in Zimbabwe, but she's from Austria, I believe I'm saying it right. As soon as she came and did one of the Bitcoin meetups in a different city, I traveled all the way to her, and we met up. We made a few Bitcoiners, and that's when our Bitcoin WhatsApp group started. It started with about 3 people who were super passionate about, bringing Bitcoin to Zimbabwe, and from 3 people we went all the way to like 500, and it wasn't an easy journey. We had to consistently do Bitcoin meetups. And this was mostly through the support of Rootstock and Money on Chain. These guys would help us kind of fund these events and also kind of give people like a few sats so that they can actually experience what it means to own Bitcoin. And since we've been doing that, we've given thousands of dollars away to these individuals, but we've also kind of given them experience, and we've kind of shown people the difference between Bitcoin and trading. And because that's one of the biggest challenges, that people always associate Bitcoin with scams, associated with trading, but they never understand that Bitcoin is just a currency, and it's the best currency on earth. So that's kind of what it kind of inspired me. So first was inspiration from Global Bitcoin Fest, but then the tools came from the Money on Chain and Rootstock. The resources came from Money on Chain and Rootstock in order to spread the word as far as possible, which has allowed me to go to different countries, Botswana, South Africa, China, and then also my local country here in Zimbabwe, where we've consistently grown the community, and you'll find that our community has people all around the world, but I'm kind of mostly focused on Zimbabwe, where Bitcoin adoption is so hard to cultivate, but we're doing our best.
And what the project is emphasizing knowledge distribution.
Yes.
What is this knowledge introduction distribution? You organize meetups, you organize a curricula, you teach people about Bitcoin, create a circular economy. How does it work?
Yes. So what we believe is the first step towards having a Bitcoin circular economy would be the knowledge. If if I just come here and say, listen, I'm accepting Bitcoin payments, but nobody knows what Bitcoin payments are, it's going to be very meaningless, right? So our first step is Bitcoin knowledge distribution, and that's where it comes through. We actually first start with Bitcoin walks. So there's a community, and I forgot the exact country, but they started an initiative where you do Bitcoin walks, and basically you just go out on the streets and you reach out to your everyday person. Hey, what do you know about Bitcoin? What would you like to know about Bitcoin? What's your interest in Bitcoin? And once you do that, you then get a bunch of people's numbers to say, hey, listen, we have a WhatsApp community, and we also host physical events where we pay for the expenses. We pay for the place that we're going to teach you about Bitcoin, and we pay for food. And sometimes we even give you, Bitcoin rewards. We also give you Bitcoin rewards. So that's the second step. So the first step is reaching out, and the second step is actually educating them through a Bitcoin meetup. So when you have all the questions, but I come with a presentation. So I find a specific topic, in Africa. So I can look at like our different histories. So for example, we in Zimbabwe, we were sanctioned in 2001 because we took back all our land. And when we took back our land, it led to us not having access to credit and not being able to make payments internationally. So I can use an example like that to say, okay, this is why Bitcoin is important, but also this is why Bitcoin DeFi is also important to to our people. So I do really well researched information about why is this important, and then we go to the next stage, which is the community itself. And I believe, we'll get to the stage of where we have a circular economy when we have enough Bitcoiners who have businesses. If you have enough Bitcoiners who have businesses, then you can start paying people in Bitcoin, and we can create that circular economy. And that's what kind of our next stage is. We're kind of working on having Bitcoiners who own the businesses to hopefully initiate the adoption, to grow that
And
adoption.
and about the restriction that you said there are in Zimbabwe, what are these restrictions, and how do you do for the new people who is coming to start using Bitcoin? Because you told me you need to
Yes.
go to South Africa to buy Bitcoin, but I'm sure that not everyone can go to South Africa to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I think the first thing that we actually need to speak on is we've got restrictions when it comes to financing in general. The first biggest restriction was just when we put our money in our banks, we could only get as little as $2 a day to withdraw as cash, and we needed to pay for transportation. We needed to buy food from supermarkets. So these were just that's just one kind of example of banking restrictions. The second is just also getting access to other assets. Let's say we wanted to buy stocks. If you're not from America, you couldn't get access to the stock market, right? So this has led to very little information or knowledge when it comes to financial, because you never had the accessibility to buy assets. And then Bitcoin comes along and says, you don't need third-party intermediaries. So now it comes to Bitcoin adoption. Bitcoin adoption. At first, Zimbabwe was leading. It was actually the leading adopter of Bitcoin. And then our government sees that Bitcoin allows trade neutrality, so it allows us to be able to send money without anyone's permission and without any restrictions. So in 2015, sorry, they banned it. They put an implicit ban, claiming that it was because of Ponzi schemes. Bitcoin is a scam, and therefore we want to protect you guys. But the real problem was that they didn't want money going out of the country. So we used to have an exchange called Gulags, Gulags, and that went away. We even had Bitcoin ATMs. As soon as the Bitcoin ATMs, that's what actually triggered it. That went away. So now getting access to Bitcoin was very challenging. And this is where some people they go buy it from exchanges. They create accounts in South Africa, or they lie about their identity and their residence. But anyway, when this ban happened, the price of Bitcoin, the premium of Bitcoin, was about 96%. People were willing to pay almost 100% more than what they were getting for. And a lot of people saw that as an opportunity, free market, supply and demand. So that created a lot of black market players who come in and started selling Bitcoin, um, who could receive Bitcoin from outside and then resell it here locally. Anyway, since then, the premium has gone down from 96% down to about 7%. 7% minimum, and then about 10% currently. So you currently have like young players who are doing as much as like $20,000 a day, sorry, $20,000 a week, including like Bitcoin sales. So there is a vibrant black market for people who, and actually the plus side about that is that you don't need an exchange. You don't need to entrust a third party. All you need is a hot wallet that allows you to keep your Bitcoin in self custody. And when you do the transaction, it's peer to peer. So there's no like I need to give someone else money. It's very trust. It's actually I think it's one of the safest ways to buy Bitcoin instead of these exchanges.
Yes,
Um,
that's what when the government. I laugh when the government say we are banning Bitcoin, because how can you ban Bitcoin? It's like you can do peer to peer. You don't need to authorize. I don't need permission to use Bitcoin.
Absolutely. There is no limit towards Bitcoin. And because another thing that Bitcoin kind of does that, like when I went to China, I wanted to open a bank account. And as soon as they saw my passport, they were like, "Oh, you're Zimbabwean. We can't give you a bank account, right?" So Bitcoin gives people who are often discriminated against the ability to be able to receive and send money in foreign countries, right? It's like the best last resort for people who are undocumented in different countries. Again, Bitcoin is one of the things, and Zimbabwe has one of the. I think it's one of the countries that has one of the most undocumented immigrants. So so many people can use Bitcoin to send money to their loved ones. So many people have actually come to me. They're like, "Oh, you do Bitcoin?" My husband or my boyfriend or my uncle, he sends me money through Bitcoin because it's the cheapest, it's the fastest. I don't have to wait in these because our lines for remittances are extremely long. With Bitcoin, you just go to an agent. It's very quick, and the agent loves it because he can get Bitcoin for at a one-to-one rate. So it's actually beneficial for people who want to receive remittances because either you can sell it for a high commission, or you can receive Bitcoin at a no, at almost maybe at 2%, which is much smaller than our traditional systems. So it's actually there is no stopping Bitcoin. There's no stopping this Bitcoin train, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's why I don't know if you read the book from Andreas Antonopoulos, The Internet of Money. He has three chapters. The first one, and he does this emphasis on not everyone on earth can access to the same banking system. For example, I live in Hong Kong, and the power that my bank account has is much higher than the power that my family bank account has in Argentina, because I can do whatever I want. I can, and for sure in different parts of the world. So when with Bitcoin, you can access to a Swiss bank account, a Swiss bank in your mobile phone, and nobody needs to ask to permission. Nobody needs to ask permission to use your Bitcoin, to save your Bitcoin. And this is another good topic, what you point, the remittance. I always say the same, but here in Hong Kong, we have a huge community of workers from the Philippines and Indonesia that come to work as mates, and they are real hard workers. And they, on Sundays, they have to queue up to send the money through these remittance agencies to the Philippines or Indonesia, and they are rip off. If they can send through Bitcoin, if they can send even through another cryptocurrency, their cost of sending money will reduce at minimum, and they will receive the money on the other side instantly. And talking about that, what role do you see Bitcoin playing in combating hyperinflation and remittances in African countries? Any personal stories from your network about that?
Yeah, I mean, so for my country, we've experienced the second highest rate of inflation, hyperinflation in the world. Um, our hyperinflation got so extreme that our government stopped recording it. It was when you look at studies, we had a hyperinflation of 86 trillion percent, 86 trillion% of hyperinflation. Like you, it'll mind blow you that for our country, like I was actually growing up, you would go you'd go into the shop and then you see like a 200%, sorry, a 200,000% increase in price, like within just an hour, right? It was mind-boggling how crazy inflation is. And since then we've had almost another about 8 currency failures. So what you see is that, like, specifically in our country, um the moment a currency starts to fail, an easy currency starts to fail, people flocked to the next hard currency. So people in our country started to flocking towards the US dollars. They started floating towards gold, and then for the people who were even smarter, started flocking towards Bitcoin, right? And um you should see, like, most of the time, like, how people get, like, I think I've given so many people, when I started getting into Bitcoin, it was around 2001, and I think the market actually crashed. So when I started teaching people about Bitcoin, it was at its lowest point. And now so many people come back to me and like, hey, listen, I've gone up by at least 500%. And then they can kind of compare it to our local currency, where it's like it doesn't even exist. The local currency that when we started was RTGs, and now we switched over to the ZIG, because the RTG currency went, I think it had a hyperinflation of about 36,000%. We're kind of always at the top when it comes to inflation, hyperinflation in terms of all currencies. So so a lot of it is kind of self-explanatory for people in our country. But it's just, I think all it is knowledge distribution. So once people know that there's a much harder currency that actually appreciates instead of depreciates, I think Zimbabweans are kind of way more open to it, towards this. And I think I think actually our country, which is very unique in that, in different parts of Zimbabwe, we have different currencies. We choose what is the hardest currency. So if you live in where I resonate, which is the second largest city, because we're close to South Africa, we use the South African currency and we use our local currency. Sorry, and US dollars. If you go a bit upwards, we use the pula and we use the US dollar. And then if you go to the main city, it's just US dollars only, right? Which kind of shows you that people can choose their own currency, right? As long as it's the hardest currency ever, which is pretty amazing. So, but if you go to a different country, everyone just uses their local currency. No one else, they don't even still like, what can I pay with? And even if it's a harder currency, even if it's a better currency, they won't accept it. Like, I've gone to South Africa, I said I've got US dollars. It's like, no. We only use things. So I think the amazing point about Zimbabwe is that we're open to using a better currency when it is when they do understand it to be a harder currency. And I think this is where Bitcoin kind of plays a major role, in that we always flock to the harder currency, as long as we understand what should the inherent monetary properties that inhibits it.
And I think that in Zimbabwe, and I found it, in Zimbabwe is famous for this bill of 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollar. Is it true?
Yes, and the ironic thing of that bill was that when it was out, it couldn't even pay for a loaf of bread.
So it's incredible.
So
Yeah, I know about inflation because I come from Argentina and we also are very huge in inflation terms. But I think that the highest inflation we experienced was in 1999, 1990, that was around 3,000%, something like that, or 4,000%. Then was the hyperinflation. I was a kid and I remember that my uncle, my aunt used to tell me that you go to the supermarket and when you pick up your product and when you go to pay, for example, you pick up this pen and this pen is $1, and when you go to to do the payment, the pen was $2. So that was the inflation, and I think that people that never lived in a country with huge inflation, they don't understand the pain that you face when you are living through inflation, the pain that you cannot um, plan for the future. One of the things that I visited Argentina in 2022, there was a huge inflation, and again, was you went to a shop. I remember I went to a shop one day to buy something, and it was 500 Argentinian pesos. And the following week, just 7 days after, it was 600. So
yes,
20% of rise in 1 week. So people probably they don't pay attention to inflation because they never lived through a high inflation. But this is a
yes,
real mess, and the inflation is something that attacks the poorest people because if you are middle class, if you can save, you can get protected but from inflation. But if you live paycheck by paycheck, inflation is super huge. And
I
talking
mean,
about yes,
yeah, I just wanted to add to your point is that the when you actually look at raw inflation, what happens is that when you look at our country, for example, inflation, because there's a rise in purchasing power, so because of the cost of purchasing power goes right, and people can't afford it. What you normally see is that it affects almost everyone. So, firstly, people think that okay, the price of markets are going up, so it's better. But what you often see is that firstly, people can't afford like your wants, your basic wants. So such as traveling, buying fast cars, buying I don't know, buying luxury houses, for example. All of these things, all of these ones go away because first you had enough customers in order to provide these services. But because now it becomes too costly for most of the citizens, a lot of these services go away. So now you start seeing that, like for example, if I want to rent an apartment in my country, I can't find an apartment at all because there is no business that's actually making apartments anymore, right? And then you say, okay, I want to travel. There are no businesses, there are no resources, there are no, like, most of the wants go away. Then then now it goes from just having wants not being affordable and not being provided, but it goes also to your needs, like your education, like your transportation, like your banking services, for example. A lot of these services go away because most individuals can't afford them. So you start seeing like there will be like there's no food on the counters anymore. There will like most of our industries in my city are gone. They're just dead ghost cities. Even though there are people there, but most of them are thing. You start seeing like things like the lowest rate of education because people can't even afford to send most of their kids to school anymore. You start seeing fuel shortages because people can't afford fuel and stuff. So it destroys the entire economy because firstly people can afford it, but also investment. You can't make an investment in the future when you can't calculate your economic cost because you don't know whether you're going to make enough. So, like for example, if you're selling your goods in your local currency, but you have to buy your foreign currency to buy your materials outside the country, if you sell these goods at a loss, at less than what it costs in the foreign currency, then that destroys your businesses. And we've had so many supermarkets actually fate what should have suffered this fate, and this is why you start seeing so many businesses actually collapse. So everything gets affected, even like our hospitals. If you look at most of our government officials who have so much money, um, are now actually sending most of their family members outside because of how broken our systems are. So it actually destroys everything, and it's not even just for like the small middle class people. I mean the business, but it's also the upper class people who can kind of get affected.
Yeah, the problem is that what I said, everyone is affected through
Yeah,
inflation, but the lower class people are the ones that cannot
yeah,
protect. All
that's,
if you are a middle class, you can save money. If you are the high class, you can send your kids abroad or whatever. But if you are a person who receives the paycheck and spend all the paycheck in groceries and living for a month, if you are
yeah.
living through inflation, it's very difficult because
But
you cannot save, you cannot protect.
yeah, but also think about it when it comes to you, like your kids. Because, for example, let's say you are earning like $100, or let's say you're earning $1,000, but because of inflation, the wages have now gone up to like, because we've seen this so many times. Our teachers used to earn $500, now they're earning like $50. If you are a rich person's kid, and then you want to now go into the economy, like you now graduated and you're now ready to get into the normal economy, you're going to earn $50 no matter who your parents are, right? You're not going to earn the same amount. So like most of your children, even if you're from a middle class family, are going to be affected and won't have the same kind of living standards that you experience. So yeah, but I mean, at least if they get to send them outside, but if they don't and they stay in the same country, then even your children kind of get affected, even though you might be one of.
Of course, that would happen in Argentina in the period between 2019 and 2023. That the inflation was so high that even people that have a job, they were poor because they couldn't afford for because they make the salary, and the price were increasing so fast that their salary was becoming worthless. And was people when I was a kid, the problem was the unemployment in Argentina. That the unemployment rate was very high. But during 2019 and 2023, the inflation was so high that the problem was that, okay, you can find a job, but the wage you get, it's nothing. That's the point. Unless you do some freelance job for
Yeah,
outside Argentina and make dollars, if you earn in Argentinian pesos, you're screw up. So that's the point.
yeah. And if you think about it, like in Zimbabwe, what we see is that, like I remember for me when I just finished high school, I was like, if I can just get a job that pays me $100, I'll be great. Just $100. And both of the like my friends, like companions were like, we just want that. And then like one of the friends got like a $300 job, and we're like, okay, this is great, this is amazing. She was happy, she was ready to move out. She moves out, she gets her own apartment, and then our inflation goes so fast, like it went so quick that the cost of her about $300, the cost of the purchasing power of about $300 was now worth maybe like $50 compared to like rent and everything else. And the sad part about Zim is that they don't adjust your wages quickly, so you can still earn like that same $300, but the inflation is going up by like at least 100% every week, or 100%, yeah, 100% every week, for example. So by the end of the month, or by the end of like 2 or 3 months, your wage practically buys you absolutely nothing, and now you kind of live destitute. So that's one of the saddest part about Zim, is that so many people, even when you do get the job, it just doesn't buy you anything, and it doesn't allow you to have an actual normal life.
Yes, yes. And I always say that for people to understand Bitcoin, they first need to know that there is a problem, the problem of
Yeah.
inflation. And when you try to orange pill people, it's easy in Zimbabwe, they understand easy, or there are any problems or any misconceptions for what people don't want to go to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I've had all the experiences. I mean, you have people who like was so open to it. They understand that they know that something is wrong, but they can't articulate what it is wrong. So when you just have a good enough conversation, long enough conversation with me, they say, okay, oh, so this is what this is what I've been experiencing. Because for example, we've had the highest rate of inflation. The highest rate of inflation. There's only one other country in mankind has ever had inflation as high as us, right? But if you go and talk to the average Zimbabwean and say, what is inflation? They can't define it. And not only can they not define it, but they can also not articulate what the exact problem is. Because basically, um, it's basically the biggest problem with inflation is the undistribution of wealth. It's like printing claims to money that most people don't watch. Putting claims to money that people don't haven't earned, basically, right? So if you increase the quantity of money, you're not like doubling the wealth of the nation. But if you can double the amount of cows, milks, iPhones, cars, you double the wealth because that's you're making the nation doubly wealthy. But if you increase the claims, then you're not. So most movies they don't understand that specific problem, and because they don't have that understand, they can't appreciate. They think that as long as I just make more money, then it's okay. But it's like, listen, you can make more money, but these guys keep printing more money of it. It's gonna be it's gonna be pretty useless. However, there are people who like when you sit them down and explain, okay, this is what inflation is, and this is the cause of inflation. I think that's how the challenge is. Our poverty, our impoverishment is very complex. It's not just one governmental body that is like responsible for this inflation. It's like one bad government plus also the international banks kind of giving these guys money for for their homes and stuff for projects that they never built, for example. And I guess you can see that these individuals are very like, oh, I didn't know this. And yeah, I think they are more open to understand that, okay, this is a problem. But it's also like, you also do find these guys who think they know everything. I believe those guys are everywhere. But the one thing that I am kind of concerned about is our adoption rate in Zimbabwe is one of the lowest in Southern Africa. I think our adoption rate is about 1%, yet most of Southern Africa is about 6%. And it was because of this policies that our government installed, where they made it very difficult and expensive for Zimbabweans to own Bitcoin. And because of that, I think that also kind of killed the interest in Bitcoin, because I believe in most Southern African countries, most adoption starts by remittances. And then they say, okay, oh, this is a good solution. Now, what is this tool that I'm using? Which then goes into the next part of saying, okay, oh, this it only just doesn't solve the remittance problem or scalability across space, but it also solves the problem of scalability across time, the ability to hold and preserve, not only preserve, but actually increase in value over time. But yeah, I just think that the major challenge is actually just getting out to them. We don't have we don't have the resources as most countries do, because we have very limited companies that will invest into Bitcoin adoption in Zimbabwe because they can't offer services here because of sanctions.
And what are the biggest misconceptions that you find when you try to orange pill people?
Okay. Yeah, our biggest misconception is actually got to do with trading and scamming. I think because our countries are very impoverished. Most of the biggest scams target African countries, right? So we've had the MMM scam, we've had Berry, we've had what we call Equilator, and most of the time, whenever these scams come, they love to use Bitcoin, and they'll even give people a higher reward if they make deposits with Bitcoin than if they make deposits with US dollars, right? So what you often see is that transactions will increase dramatically. Bitcoin transactions will increase dramatically whenever there's a new scam that comes about. Um, and then the problem is that they now just generally associate Bitcoin with that scam. And which is the sad part is that often, like, if people just like took time to learn about Bitcoin instead of these scams, instead of these fast money scams, they would have made way more wealth than investing in these Ponzi schemes. So I think Ponzi schemes are very, very harmful for the Bitcoin community. And then the other challenge might be actually trading itself. Again, like Bitcoin, when it comes to payments, everyone, even businesses, like I find so many people, doing big transactions in Bitcoin for different commodities, different resources in Zimbabwe. But even when it comes to like now, when it comes to like Forex, um, these exchanges also want Bitcoin because it's much easier. There are no KYC restrictions, for example, that prevents these payments. So again, whenever people lose money in forex, they're like, oh, I deposited Bitcoin, so Bitcoin is what made me lose my money. Um, so yeah, these kind of misconceptions is association by
Yeah,
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 guilty
that's
by
why
association.
some people, yeah, because the scammers use Bitcoin as a scam, they
Yeah,
associate Bitcoin as the scam, but Bitcoin is just the tool that the scammers do. And nowadays, how big is the community that you host? And this do you host events like meetups or hackathons? How do you proceed?
yeah. We we host hackathons, but I'm not the most technical for hackathons. Our biggest events normally are just like our biggest meetups. I mean, we've had, I think if you're to see some of the videos, there's times where we've almost like occupied the entire half of a restaurant, and like this restaurant it'll be pretty massive. It looks like I don't know what can I call it. But it's like it's like a pretty big maybe like if it's not 100 square meters, we'll take up like 50 square meters of just so many people coming into the restaurant and wanting to learn about Bitcoin. Um, and then we've our local WhatsApp group is about 500 people, but that's just for WhatsApp. But then we always have people that come outside of the WhatsApp group um uh uh to attend to attend these events. And yeah, it's been it's that's kind of like what our community kind of composed of. We sometimes do these regular events, and then we also have different spaces and all this stuff to go
And
inside
and
with it.
and what are the most common questions that people ask when they
Okay.
start discovering Bitcoin? And how do you answer these questions?
Yeah, I think the biggest concern often is Bitcoin's volatility, right? And my response is always, I think it's either because volatility or Bitcoin is too expensive, right? And what I often like to do is that I like to use basic investing principles, which means that what is the intrinsic value of Bitcoin, right? And if you understand how intrinsic value works, and say, okay, if we can give like Bitcoin intrinsic value, I know all subjective is value, but all value is subjective. But if you can give your own intrinsic value of Bitcoin and say, okay, like maybe like Michael Saylor puts an intrinsic value of $30 million a coin. You say, okay, how does Michael Saylor get to this evaluation? He says, Bitcoin is starting at a compounded growth rate of 55%, and it's gonna go down by it's gonna go like this, keep going like this, but it's gonna reduce every year by 5%, and until it goes down to about maybe 20%, and then from there it'll just keep going at 20% until it's about $30 million a coin. We say, okay, how can we calculate a Bitcoin intrinsic value? And Bitcoin intrinsic value we can even use Greg Foss intrinsic value of maybe I think it was about $5 million a coin, saying that if we take 10% of all global assets, right, or 5% of all global assets, it can be worth either $2 million or $5 million a coin, for example. Now, when you establish Bitcoin's intrinsic value, whatever price under this intrinsic value is undervalued. It is completely undervalued. So short-term volatility doesn't is not important. What's important is buying and holding for the long run until it hits the intrinsic value. And I show that intrinsic value when it comes to every other asset classes, whether you're buying a ice cream shop, a barber shop, a dairy board factory, whatever it is. You're not going to buy the business for what it's worth right now, but you're saying based on the future performance of this asset, what can you evaluate this business at, right? And once you address the concern of volatility, people are way more comfortable investing in Bitcoin. So yeah, volatility is always the biggest concern, but I love that question because it's one of the easiest questions ever.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's volatility, and again, I most of the things that I always ask, that I always listen is Bitcoin is so expensive now. Bitcoin is so expensive now. But
yeah,
as you said, if you think in long term, if you think in buying and holding, Bitcoin is gonna be
yeah,
cheap at 117 like now, it's going to be cheap at 200, it's going to be cheap at 1 million, because it's the
Yeah.
most scarce asset and property in the history of humanity. Of course, if you think in the short term,
Absolutely.
if you want to trade, sometimes it's expensive, sometimes not. But if you think the
Yeah.
long term, that is the way you need to think about Bitcoin. Of course,
Yeah.
always is gonna be cheap. And what challenges have you faced in educating about Bitcoin in areas with regulatory hurdles or widespread misinformation, especially with the regulations that you are telling me in Zimbabwe?
Yeah. It's very difficult. Because you remember when I talked about Zimbabwe was Zimbabwe was put on sanctions, right? So what happens with sanctions is that um, any country that has bilateral relationships with the United States, what you call it, can be unilaterally what you call it, punished for offering services to Zimbabwe, right? Offering services, employing a Zimbabwean, just anything. So like the punishment is like you can get a $1 million plus fine for transacting with a with a Zimbabwean entity, right? That's on the sanction list. And because banks or financial services don't know who and what entities are under the sanctioned list, they do what we call de-risking, which means that they just say, okay, it's too expensive. The fine of dealing with Zimbabwe is too expensive that we'll just not do any business with any Zimbabwean. So for most of the time when I was in the Bitcoin community, almost every Bitcoin company would not be able to work with us to offer services, to do Bitcoin meetups. If they wanted to even give us sponsorships, like hardware wallets, or job, for example, they wouldn't do that, right? Because of these specific sanctions. So we're basically like written off by most Bitcoin businesses, right? Which means that we don't have the same funding and they don't have the same resources to reach out to most communities. And then you also have like local regulations, the fact that, Bitcoin becomes more expensive to buy Bitcoin on the black market than if people were buying on an exchange, right? So that's why like I've always tried my level best to whenever I get paid in Bitcoin, I sell my Bitcoin at a 1-to-1 rate or at a basically a 1-to-1 rate so that it's very cheap for many people who want to start the Bitcoin journey as much as possible. So the off and unwrapping, oh again, sometimes we will reach out to businesses in Zimbabwe, like, hey, we want to offer you, we want to buy your service in Zimbabwe in Bitcoin. And then they'll be like, well, because our government doesn't recognize it as a legal currency, we can't offer our services, which is a bit of a challenge. Uh, so yeah, it's a really big impediment when it comes to our adoption rate, to getting to working with other bigger institutions, and that's what's sad. It's like I thought out of all institutions, bigger institutions will be like trade neutral. They'll recognize you for wherever you are, but it's not the case. Um, and then I think those are kind of the one most of the biggest challenges is from the regulatory environment. It really does kind of restrict um, the amount of resources that we have compared to everyone else. But also, I work for a layer 2 Bitcoin company. So if you only believe in Bitcoin layer 1, um, and you say, okay, anything that's not on Bitcoin layer 2 is not pure, then what you call it? We tried working with, I believe it was Bitcoin. What was it? Is Bitcoin El Salvador? Mi Premier, sorry, yeah. And
Mi primer Bitcoin.
so Mi Premier Bitcoin only offers education on layer 1, and because we offer education on layer 2, they believe that's a conflict of interest. So we couldn't work with them anymore, for example. So and then so now you have to kind of create your own curriculum if you want to go down that route. So yeah, sometimes we are kind of miss out opportunities because our only sponsorship is the layer 2 Bitcoin. And aside, because we believe that layer 2 just help the scalability of Bitcoin itself. not take from it. Yeah.
Excellent. And besides regulatory problems, are there any other issues that are stopping the massive adoption of Bitcoin in Zimbabwe? Technical issues, educational issues?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I believe it's like, for example, I think um, Majam Kura wanted to set up um, his protocol in Zimbabwe, but because there's an implicit ban, he needs like the I think telecommunication network that we have set up here. And it's not even just much on Quora. Other people have wanted to come in and set up a USSD system where instead of what you're using the internet for Bitcoin payments, you can send text messages on your mobile network. That wasn't possible because again you have to go to the government to get such approval, for example, right? So that's kind of one of the impediments of thing. We also have sometimes kind of a challenge when it comes to internet, but okay, internet isn't too big of a challenge. Um, but yeah, it's mostly just our implicit ban, which doesn't allow individuals to off ramp and on ramp to on top of the Bitcoin network. You know, yeah, I think that's. I mean, even like if you look at other countries like Ethiopia, where these guys have, I think that they're making like $27 million from Bitcoin mining using what should the hydroelectric dam. Zimbabwe has has the biggest man-made lake in the world, Lake Kariba, right? It currently is still under capacity. I think because we had a 40-year drought, we don't have enough water to generate enough power. But we're investing heavily. We're investing into nuclear energy. We're investing in solar energy. We've got a lot of hydro. I mean, even the hydroelectric jam. I think they're also investing into that to improve upon that. But when we have all this excess energy, Bitcoin mining would have been a viable option. In 2018, we had a cost of electricity was 1 cent a kilowatt. So anything under 5 cents, I don't know if it's still the case, but anything under 5 cents a kilowatt means that it's very profitable for you to mine Bitcoin. Zimbabwe, because of hydroelectric power, was at 1 cent and an inflation. So that could have been a revenue stream that Zimbabwe could have tapped into, but again, because of the government not being open-minded to that, again, it kind of challenges that issue. And I think even with the hyperinflation, um, our cost of electricity fluctuates quite a bit. So we've had people try to set up a mining system here in Zimbabwe, but because our cost of electricity will sometimes be at like 3 cents, 5 cents, and then it'll go all the way up to 10 cents. These fluctuations kind of make it hard to make economic calculations in advance to operate a Bitcoin miner, so yeah, these are some of the impediments that we do face as well. Yeah.
And talking about the future, what are the plans that you have for Bitcoin Reach?
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know if I can mention it by now, but we what I'm trying to work on is a specific business that I believe will be able to pay um like communities, like just normal people, but because there's like there are items that we can buy, and if we can pay for that in Bitcoin, um the company that we're trying to set up. Sorry, the network. Yeah, so the company that we're wanting to set up, we believe that will allow us to buy and pay for a lot of these items in Bitcoin. And the nice part about it is it doesn't require any bank restrictions. So every household has it, and we're gonna start with one small neighborhood, and then keep expanding into probably. So our biggest plan is kind of setting up a Bitcoin businesses, and then we just have some of our community members who have Bitcoin businesses paying Bitcoin hours, and that will incentivize people to learn about Bitcoin. I believe the business owners are really one of the key items because they're the ones who determine how to pay, what currency to pay out, for example. So yes, that's going to be one of our biggest plays in the Bitcoin Reach community.
And talking about the future of Bitcoin, how do you see it?
Yes. Yeah. So you know what I believe that we're gonna see a lot more shops because what us in Zimbabwe, for example, we love to say that whatever South Africa does, Zimbabwe is going to copy. And South Africa is already, you're already seeing that Pick and Pay accepts Bitcoin in South Africa. You can already pay for fuel in South Africa. You can actually go to a restaurant, buy a voucher. Even like our online shopping is can be done. A lot of Zimbabweans, we use a online shopping, not it's like Amazon, but this thing called Take a Loss. They already said Bitcoin for payments. So what we're going to see is that we're going to see much more adoption when it comes to Bitcoin services, and I think that's what's going to happen. Is mostly Bitcoin services are going to start accepting Bitcoin, but also the price of Bitcoin is going to be enticing. I think people stop talking about it right now because it's still at $100,000. But the moment it goes to $500,000 and $1 million, a lot of people are going to wake up and start swanning the coffee, because I think some people say, okay, we shouldn't be excited because institutions are getting into Bitcoin. But if they increase the price, that will inspire a lot of retail traders to start saying, okay, wait here, what is this thing about Bitcoin? So I do think that, like what Michael Saylor is talking about, Bitcoin will go from, will have a CAGR of about 55%, go down by 5% every year, which is like insane. When you look at most of what we call quantum leaps, for example, if you look at the quantum leap for the computer and microchip quantum leap, it did a 20% CAGR for 37 years, and that converted $1,000 to $1 million. Just 20%. Bitcoin is double that by now. So the opportunity to create wealth is really there, and even with a small amount, what history has shown us is that even a small amount of $1,000 can turn into millions of dollars, and if we just are willing to invest early and wait patiently for this investment. So I do believe that Bitcoin is going to be the best performing asset for this next 2 or 3 decades, and that will create a lot of wealth and for people who think can wake up to the coffee. And I hope to get as many people into it. I was fortunate enough to start advising people to buy into Bitcoin, and so many people come to me and are happy that I told them about it. And I'm actually happy that it's gone as well as it has been. So the future is still very positive for us.
Yes, I do agree with you. I think that the future is amazing with Bitcoin. We need to keep educating people, and we need to onboard people into Bitcoin. And the last question,
Yes.
Alessandria, is if you had the chance to sit down with Satoshi Nakamoto to have a coffee, what would you ask or say to him, her, or them?
Okay. Yeah, you know what? I would be so. I think actually, I don't think I can ask him, but I'll be so appreciative that he created a monetary system, that is trade neutral, because I think a lot of people kind of focus more on Bitcoin's performance, like how much they can make in return. But if you look at, for people of my descent, the African lineage, we've been, a lot of our community, or a lot of our countries have been disrupted by simply cutting out of the financial systems. So if there's anything that's going to really change the fate of Africans, is having us operating on a monetary system where no one can decide, who participates and who doesn't participate in it. So yeah, that's what I'll be super appreciative for Satoshi Nakamoto. I'll probably shake his hand. Yeah.
Excellent. So, Alexandria, thank you very much for your time. Anything else you want to add, and how the people can contact you?
Yes, no, no. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to join the space. I just wanted to ask. You said your podcast is a libertarian Bitcoin podcast. Is this because of the libertarian government structure? Are you a libertarian yourself?
I'm a no, no, I'm a libertarian. I'm a libertarian since even before Bitcoin was created. So when I studied. Long story, my story is I studied economics in the 2000s, and
Okay.
I was always a follower of Austrian School of Economics.
Yes.
And I'm more than libertarian. I consider myself anarcho-capitalist because
Very
I
good.
don't believe in the governments. For me,
Yeah.
governments are corrupt. The governments are, even though there are people with good intentions, as happened in my
Yes.
country with the president, all the government, all the system is rotten. And if one
Yeah.
person has good intention, cannot change it. So for me, I'm technically an anarcho-capitalist. I study a lot of Rothbard, of Hayek, of the Ocean School of Economics. I
Yeah.
discovered Bitcoin really early in 2010, but I didn't pay the attention that it deserved. So it took me 10 years to understand. And that's why I don't have a big stack now, and I'm not millionaire. If I had understood at that time, I would have bought more, and probably my present would be different. But I don't complain. And yes, I am. Then when I become on X, we the X account is two. We are is run by two persons, by me and my business partner. And the past name was the Bitcoin Energy Standard. So we wanted to
Okay.
remove that because we create a podcast and we say, okay, how can we call the Bitcoin what? And we say, okay, the Bitcoin Libertarian, because of course I'm an anarcho-capitalist, but I'm also if I have to follow a political idea today, I would be a libertarian. So that's
Yes.
why it's the Bitcoin
Yes.
Libertarian. My Argentinian flag because I'm from Argentina. The United States flag because it's the
Yeah.
biggest audience that we have, and El Salvador flag because, of course, if you're a Bitcoiner, El Salvador is like the Holy Land. So that's why. But yeah, I'm a libertarian, so that's why I am the Bitcoin Libertarian.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I love that because I also consider myself a narco-capitalist. I think that the state has always been the biggest aggressor amongst its people, and for me, for specifically, our government is run by the army, and they have a saying that "apano munano tonga asinamboendo kuondo," which means that there's no one that's ever going to lead the country who didn't fight in the army, which means that they won't even allow, even democratically, even a democratic leader. And even for my lineage, I'm from Swazi, and we still actually have the only king in Africa, the only monarchy that actually currently exists. And if you see the living standards of our people, horrible. So centralization is never been a good thing for any people.
No way. And
Yeah. So yeah.
yes,
And
go.
also it's just yeah, but my friend asked me that he had a question for the podcast. He said, like, how would libertarianism work in Zimbabwe? And it would be like, yeah, I think libertarianism would basically mean that, no one speaks for you. I think you are the best individual who can, because of the skin in the game, you have the best incentive to learn as much as possible for your industry. And you would you would, what you call it, there'll be no one controlling your resources, etc. So yeah, so it's most important part.
And as our president said, is that the libertarianism is the unrestricted respect for the life project of others, based on the
Yeah.
principle of non-aggression and in defense of the rights to live, liberty, and property. So this is to be a libertarian, and these are the values that I respect and I follow: life, liberty, freedom,
That's
and property. And if you are a Bitcoiner, of course, that are the values that you have, the values
yeah.
that you defend every day, and the values that is worth die for. As Chuck Moller says, I'm ready to die in this hill fighting for Bitcoin, because I think that, and especially when I talk about Bitcoin with people from Africa, from Latin America, you see how Bitcoin, because now we are so with all these Bitcoin treasury companies, with all the hype of Wall Street coming to Bitcoin. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, Bitcoin was created for the people who has no bank, for the people who
Yeah.
is out of the financial system, to create a better world, a better place to live. So that's why I love Bitcoin. I'm a libertarian, and we are doing this to spread the word of Satoshi. We need to bring 8 billion people to use Bitcoin, and again, to make the world a better place to live.
Absolutely. All right.
So,
Yes, thank you. Yes, so
yes,
yes, so no, I was just
hello.
gonna say where people can find me is I'm saying where people can find me is just Bitcoin Reach on Twitter, even Bitcoin Reach on Instagram, and Alexandria 97 on X.
Excellent, excellent. So Alexandria, again, thank you very much for your time, and I wish you the best to all the projects that you are running. And of course, I always say I've never been to Africa. I've never been to Africa. I only been in Africa with stops over on the plane on the way to Asia, between Asia and South America. But of course, I will go. I want to go to one of these Bitcoin conferences in Africa to meet the Bitcoiners there, and again to have a different perspective of Bitcoin that, in my opinion, is the real perspective why Satoshi created Bitcoin, to give bank to the unbanked,
Yes.
to bring the financial freedom to the people who don't have financial freedom, and to bring hope to the people who need the most. Alexandria, again, thank you very much for your time, and have a great day.
Same to you. Cheers, eh?
And thank you very much to everyone who is on the other side. If you like the episode, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our social media, our Twitter, the Bitcoin _, our YouTube in English, Libertarian BTC, our YouTube in Spanish, Libertarian BTC. You can enter there and you will find all our social media. Share this episode with the people you love. Share this episode with the people you hate, because we must reach 8 billion people and onboard them into Bitcoin. See you in the next episode of our podcast. Stay humble, stack sats, and remember,